Hello, I'm Jeff Helgeson, speaking from Heirloom Books at 6239 North Clark Street in Chicago, Illinois. My topic today consists of narratives regarding what archaeological evidence since the mid-19th century has suggested may have been an actual historic event, the Trojan War. Having developed during the centuries following the collapse of Bronze Age civilization about 3,000 years ago, an oral tradition that emerged around a possible conflict between early Greek and Anatolian cultures, like much of that of the Old Testament, is apparently a mix of spiritual belief and historic legend. Sometime around 400 years ago, after the possible conflict, and 400 years before the time of the first Greek historian, Herodotus, around 2,500 years ago, a writer or writers called Homer recorded an episode of some 52 days during the 10th year of the war surrounding what was described as the Wrath of Achilles in one of the world's greatest books, the Iliad. The thing is, that's only part of the story. Emerging at different times, apparently both before and after the writing of the Iliad, a chronicle called the Cycle was developed, which provides an account of events preceding and following what was recorded by Homer. Within this narrative, according to some sources, the god Zeus may have felt the earth to have become overpopulated, and that war, in fact, was the answer. At any rate, in my mind, the cycle is predominantly concerned with the action described, the what of the events presented on a literal or manifest level, more so than their why, how, or so what. And for me anyway, all of this begins with the rape of a queen of Sparta named Leda by Zeus in the form of a swan. She then gave birth to a daughter named Helen, and the rest, as I see it, can largely be said to have been her story. As a result of Helen's divine paternal parentage, and therefore growing up to become the most beautiful woman in the world, she, somewhat naturally, as the world's ultimate bachelorette, attracted a great many suitors, consisting of virtually all the eligible bachelor princes in Greece. They included Ajax, Diomed, Elpenor, Menelaus, Patroclus, and Odysseus. However, assuming he had no real chance with Helen, Odysseus brought no gifts for her. He also had become attracted to another woman, Penelope, apparently so he could focus upon his own intentions. Resourceful Odysseus, as Homer often terms him, endorsed the idea that Helen should be granted the right to select a husband for herself, and that her suitors should each pledge to support the union resulting from her choice. Perhaps based on the principle of the suitor you know is better than the ones you don't, Helen chose Menelaus, the younger brother of her half-sister Clytemnestra's husband Agamemnon, and the two great-grandsons of the eternally condemned Tantalus, whose father had been Zeus. And then a horse was sacrificed in honor of the marriage. Once freed to follow his own inclinations, Odysseus requested Penelope's hand in marriage, but her father, reluctant to allow her to leave him, asked his daughter to choose between himself and her suitor. Apparently conflicted, and rather than openly expressing a preference, she responded by covering her face with a veil. Her father then agreed that if Odysseus could beat him in a foot race, he would allow the marriage. Cheating to win his bride, Odysseus then took Penelope to his home in Ithaca, building their palace around a living olive tree that he made into the headboard of their bed. Sometime later, far away on Mount Olympus, at the marriage of Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis, Like the 13th fairy in the story of Sleeping Beauty, the goddess of discord, not having been invited, crashes the festivities and casts a golden apple at the feet of Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, upon which appears the inscription, "For the fairest." Of course, each goddess immediately claims this prize, and Zeus is asked to choose among them his wife, his daughter, and his great aunt, which, naturally enough, he is somewhat reticent about doing. So, instead, he suggests the judgment should be made by a banished prince of Troy named Paris. You see, it seems that while pregnant with him, his mother, Hecuba, wife of the Trojan king Priam, had dreamed that she'd been giving birth to a burning firebrand which would set their home ablaze. Having told her husband about the dream as a precaution, once the boy approached adolescence, Priam sent him away to a distant part of the kingdom. Now, when the goddesses appeared to Paris, asking him to decide which of them is the fairest, and if they attempt to bribe him, Hera offering riches, Athena offering wisdom, and Aphrodite promising the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, as a male having recently come into puberty while exiled among his father's sheep, Paris made the choice anyone might expect, pleasing Aphrodite and angering the other two goddesses. Under the auspices of the goddess of love, Paris is sent as an ambassador to Sparta and graciously received by Menelaus, but is then left alone in the palace while the king went off on a mission to Crete. Succeeding in seducing Helen, Paris returns to Troy on the broad coast of present-day Turkey, where horses were especially revered. When Menelaus comes back discovering what's happened, he calls upon all those who had pledged to defend his marriage, yet Odysseus does not respond. Palamedes is then sent to get him, but happily married and having a newborn son named Telemachus, Odysseus pretends to have gone mad, plowing a field behind an oxen and an ass and sowing it with salt instead of seed. However, when the young baby is placed in front of the plow, Odysseus, like any caring father, avoids harming his child, demonstrating his sanity and consequently getting himself impressed into the army. So, if he's going to war, Odysseus is determined that Achilles, the son of the couple married on Mount Olympus, now a teenager, should have to go as well. But Achilles' mother, having been told her son would either live a short, heroic life or a long, uneventful one, to help protect him as an infant, holding him firmly by one heel, had dipped her son in the immortal river Styx, making him invulnerable where he had been touched by the water. And as a further precaution, she's also hidden Achilles, disguised as a girl, among a group of young women. Learning this, crafty Odysseus disguised himself as a merchant with an inventory of decorative ornaments and some weapons. And when Achilles became attracted to what Winston Churchill would have termed the tools of war, he was therefore conscripted to join the cause. By this time, the Greeks had begun to assemble their fleet of what playwright Christopher Marlowe in the late 1500s described as 1,000 ships. But Agamemnon, brother of the abandoned husband who'd been selected to lead the expedition, had inadvertently killed a deer which was sacred to the goddess Diana, and she demanded a sacrifice before allowing the winds to blow that would take the Greek fleet to Troy. Consequently, under the pretext of a betrothal to Achilles, Agamemnon's eldest daughter, Iphigenia, is sent for, and at the point of her being ritually killed, a fog sweeps in off the sea and the winds begin to blow. Greeks immediately set sail for Troy, where the ensuing war continued in stalemate for the next 10 years. This is the point at which Homer begins the Iliad. Beseeching the muse, sing, O goddess of the wrath of Achilles, who by this time had become the Greeks' greatest warrior. In brief summary, a priest of Apollo comes to the Greek camp and asks for return of his captured daughter, who Agamemnon had taken as a concubine. When refused, he prays to have a plague sent against the invaders. With soldiers dying, Achilles calls an assembly, eventually getting the king to give up the girl, who, pulling rank as the leader of the Greek forces, he then replaces with a concubine Achilles had claimed for himself. This is the cause of the young warrior's wrath. Achilles then refuses to fight, withdrawing his troops and praying to his mother that the Greeks be defeated in his absence as a way of demonstrating how much he's needed. To help compensate for this reduction in forces, at the suggestion of an aged Greek king named Nestor, the invaders build a wall to help defend their ships. Nonetheless, the Trojans begin to gain the advantage. So Agamemnon sends Odysseus and Ajax to say he's willing to return the girl who he claims he's never touched. But Achilles refuses to rejoin the fight. Led by Hector, the oldest son of King Priam, the Greeks' wall is breached and their ships are about to be set on fire until Ajax manages to drive back the attackers. Then Palamedes, who had compelled Odysseus to come to Troy in the first place, advises abandoning the war. But as a way to gain revenge for having gotten him drafted, Odysseus accuses him of being a spy and succeeds in having Palamedes stoned to death based on evidence that the resentful conscript had planted in his tent. At this point, Patroclus, Achilles' somewhat older close friend, persuades the absent hero to lend him his armor so that he can make the Trojans think that the Greeks' best warrior has returned to the battlefield. Patroclus succeeds in this effort, but venturing beyond his ability, is killed by Hector, who strips him of Achilles' armor. After the body of Patroclus has been brought back to the Greek camp and buried, enraged and grieving the death of his friend, Achilles asks his mother to have new armor made for him by the blacksmiths of the gods. Re-equipped, he leads an attack, driving the Trojans back into their city, all except for Hector, breaker of horses, as Homer frequently calls him. The two warriors then meet in battle, and, deceived by Athena, who still hates the Trojans because of Paris having refused to give her the golden apple, Hector is killed, stripped of the armor he had been wearing after having taken it off Patroclus' body, and his corpse is then dragged behind Achilles' chariot to the Greek ships, where it is desecrated, although preserved from harm by those gods who have sided with Troy. What's next is probably the most moving passage in the whole of the epic, when, under cover of night, Hector's father goes to the tent of the man who had killed his son. Unseen, great Priam entered, coming close to Achilles, and clasped in his hands his knees, and kissed the terrible man-slaying hands which had killed his many sons. And Achilles was seized with wonder. Then Priam made entreaty, saying, "Remember thy father Achilles, whose years as mine are on the threshold of old age. While he heareth of thee as yet alive, he hath joy at heart and hope to see his son return to him. But I who begat the best sons in the broad land of Troy, am utterly unblessed. 50 I had when the Achaeans came. Of these, only one remained to guard my city. Him, Hector, you have slain, and I have now come to win his body back. Take pity on me, Achilles, remembering thine own father. Yet I am far more piteous than he, for I have endured what no mortal hath yet endured. I have kissed the hands of the man who killed my sons. So he spoke, and in Achilles he roused desire to weep, causing him then to say, Unhappy man, come sit upon a seat, and our sorrows will we suffer to lie in quiet, despite our pain. For no profit can come of lament. The burial is then held, followed by athletic games, and that is where Homer leaves the story, the wrath of Achilles having been assuaged. According to the larger cycle, however, things continue. During the truce following Hector's burial, Achilles becomes attracted to the dead Trojan sister, Polyxena, and offers to negotiate a truce in exchange for her hand in marriage. But Paris, from the safety of the high walls of Troy, shoots a poisoned arrow, which is guided by Apollo to strike Achilles in his only vulnerable spot, his heel, quickly causing him to die. Ajax and Odysseus then rescue Achilles' body, each claiming the hero's newly made armor. But the Greek leaders, apparently favoring mental ability over physical strength, award it to Odysseus, the man of many ways. This causes Ajax to withdraw from battle, Athena driving him insane so that he tortures several sheep, believing them to be the Greek chiefs who had denied him the reward he felt that he deserved. Once his senses return, Ajax kills himself, and Agamemnon refuses to let the body be buried until Ajax's brother Teucer persuades him to allow a funeral. Subsequently, Paris is wounded by an arrow that had once belonged to Hercules, soon dying of his injury, and Helen begins to secretly assist the Greeks from inside Troy, while Odysseus devises a plan according to which the Greeks appear to abandon their camps and set sail, leaving behind as tribute a gigantic wooden horse within which Odysseus and a group of Greek soldiers remain hiding. A Trojan priest named Laocoon, along with his 2 sons, attempt to warn the citizens of the city to fear Greeks even when they offer gifts, suggesting that the wooden horse should be burned. But Apollo sends 2 giant serpents to attack the priest and his sons, strangling them on the spot. The wooden horse is then brought into the city, and a great victory celebration takes place, after which Odysseus and his men come from their hiding place and open the city gates, allowing the Greeks who have returned after 10 long years to finally conquer Troy, killing all its inhabitants and defenders, except for a small group led by Aeneas, the son of Aphrodite, and Troy's second best warrior, who managed to escape. King Priam goes down fighting. His wife and daughter, Cassandra, to whom Apollo had given the ability to foresee the future, but after she'd rejected his advances, caused no one to ever believe her, being made captives. King's other daughter, Polyxena, at the apparent request of his ghost, was sacrificed on Achilles' grave. Also, so that he could never come to seek revenge, Hector's young son was thrown to his death from the high walls of Troy, and Helen was finally returned to her husband Menelaus. In general summary, that's the story, at least as it was assembled over time into a truly action-packed combination of possible cultural memory, myth, and legend. Next time, I'll be talking about 3 different sequences of events following the fall of Troy. But for the present, I can only try to catch my breath and recommend spending some time with Homer in any translation. Heirloom Books is located at 6239 North Clark Street in Chicago, Illinois, and is open 7 days a week from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 in the evening.